I'm doing like 2-3 injections a week, daily injections, twice daily transscrotal cream. I've got my protocol dialed in, but they're, drinking 2 beers a night. They're 25% body fat. They're not training properly. They're eating a bullshit diet. They're not sleeping properly. They've got all these lifestyle deficits that would be leading to testosterone suppression. So the body is pumping the brakes, and they're coming in and they're going, I'm smarter than you. I'm going to pump the accelerator. And what happens? The car's not driving forward smoothly.
Welcome to the Full Fueled Podcast. Welcome to the Full Fueled Podcast. Welcome to the podcast. With your host, Matt Tack. Your host, Matt Tack. Who are you?
I'm Dr. Alfred Alessi.
Dr. Alfred Alessi.
Dr. Alfred Alessi.
They know by now, bro. They know by now.
I'm going to set what the new normal looks like in my life.
You're not limited by your genetics.
You have a superpower that is lifting people up. Dude, you look real.
The only way we're going to get the word out is with you. Live full fueled. Live beyond limits, baby. Let's go.
All right, sweet. Welcome back to the Full Fueled Podcast
With your host, Matt Tack.
and Dr. Alfred Alessi. We got a fun episode today, man. Really cool guy in the space of testosterone optimization and just men's health in general. Dave Lee is the creator, owner, and coach of Advanced Fundamental Health, where he has spent the past 5 years coaching thousands of clients in the practice and use of TRT and hormones for health optimization. He's the author of 2, soon to be 3 books, and has over 100 informational videos on YouTube, including the most viewed videos on DHT and pregnenolone. Dave, thank you for joining us, and welcome to Full Fueled, man.
Thank you for having me.
And not to mention, he's got an epic beard too, so I'm totally,
We're
totally digging it, man.
We're 3 out of 3 on season 2 with the epic beards.
Everyone's got epic beards nowadays, bro.
There is an odd one out on your end. I did notice that. I didn't want to say anything.
That's all good, man. Real recognizes real around here. But awesome, man. Well, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for taking your time. Just to get going, man, can you give us a little background about yourself, kind of your journey in the health and wellness space, how you got into what you're doing, and why ultimately you started the Advanced Fundamental Health?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a former life, I was actually into digital marketing and music. So I was formerly a musician, and I did my undergrad in marketing. I had a traumatic brain injury in my mid-20s, and I was rendered quite incapacitated from it. I had a lot of difficulty walking, and I was given the prognosis that it was incurable. So this took me, very long story short, but it took me back to university to get my postgraduate studies in neuropsychiatry. I ended up dropping out of that field because I wasn't a fan of a lot of the approaches in psychiatric medicine. And that led me to a combination of brain rehabilitation supported with hormone replacement therapy, not only for the mechanisms of neural restoration that the TRT allowed me to activate, but also the resilience, determination, and drive to be able to get through a very difficult period in my life. At the end of this, I wasn't really interested in anything else except helping men go through their struggles and also help men navigate the field of hormone replacement therapy. When I started TRT in Australia, there was one doctor in the whole country who was prescribing it. I think at the time, my friend Jay Campbell had the only book in the space available on the subject. And there was a huge lack of information, and there was a huge group of men who were also struggling with the same thing that I'd struggled with a few years prior. So over the COVID period, I transitioned into doing health coaching full time because it was just something that I had a lot more expertise in than my former field. And it also gave me a lot more fulfillment. So I've been doing that ever since, coaching guys through their hormone replacement therapy journey. And in the time I've been doing that, I've niched into a few more complex areas, helping guys troubleshoot areas that maybe their providers or clinics aren't privy to. And that's led me to speaking at the Olympia a couple of years in a row. I'll be heading back over to Vegas this year to speak at the Olympia again, as well as a few international summits. And it's led me to being also an educator in the space as well, which has been very exciting. But most importantly, helping thousands and thousands of men all over the world get their TRT dialed in and get their health and life back together.
Man, that's awesome. And we have a mutual friend in Jay Campbell. He was on our show maybe, like 8 months ago or something. Yeah. He's an awesome guy. He's local here in Tampa as well. So that was a really cool conversation we had with him. And it's the same thing that he talks about that you're kind of talking about is like optimizing it, right? Not just replacing it. And, I think a lot of people, it's our own story that then kind of leads us to want to help other people, you know?
Absolutely. There's, testosterone replacement therapy and there's testosterone optimization therapy. And I think that, getting bogged down on definitions isn't really helpful for anything. But for the sake of what we're talking about there, it's the idea that there's a very basic way to do TRT, which is better than nothing. But there are tweaks and increments to not just the TRT protocol, but also the diet, the lifestyle, everything around it that allows the hormone optimization therapy to deliver a whole extra league of benefits beyond what just a one jab or two jabs a week of testosterone can. And I think that the majority of guys, when they start TRT, their goals are not just to replace testosterone. They want to have a high libido. They want to have great cognitive function. They want to have great physical health. They want to have great sleep. They want to have everything that goes with it. And testosterone replacement therapy alone does not do that. And I think that that's what has carved the need in the market for people like myself, people like Jay, other practitioners all over the world and in the States who are helping men to use testosterone replacement therapy as a foundation to truly optimize all aspects of their health.
Yeah, that's huge. One of the things, I've even had kind of my road of, getting blood work done and then ultimately coming back from but optimizing the therapy, right? So I'm more of a 3-week injectable guy, where I just feel like that there's a stronger cadence throughout the week for me. But as we go into maybe a little bit more of the nerdy side of like testosterone and testosterone optimization therapy, what is like that, one side effect that usually comes out in maybe guys that are in the aging population? They might be getting into their later 30s. What is like something that you could just bring to light that is usually where, hey, this is something maybe where you need to get your testosterone checked out?
That's a good question. It pops up in different categories for different people, but I would say the two most common things that guys would come up with, and I know the question was for one, but I'm going to give two. One is reduced sexual capacity or reduced sexual function overall. And this can be anything from incomplete erections. This can be, indifference towards sex. This can just be a significantly lower libido than what they're used to having. And I think that that's an important proxy for a man's overall drive. I think that sex drive for a man is a manifestation of his overall drive towards life. So I think that that's the area that it can often show up in terms of the area that he's the most aware of, but it has also started trickling into other aspects of his life as well, but that might not be top of mind for him. The other thing that pops up a lot is that guys just don't have the correct body composition that they should have. So their outputs and inputs don't align. So guys are eating well, training well, and they look like shit. And they're in a scenario where they're like, hey, I'm actually doing everything right. And they might be in a situation where their personal trainer is being like, hey, you're not counting your macros properly. You're not tracking your sources, shit like that they're like, no, I'm actually doing this stuff right. And my body's not responding the way that it should be responding. And this can be a very frustrating point for guys because if they don't dive into what's going on and resolve it, they'll end up becoming discouraged and jaded because they're not getting the results they deserve from their training and their nutrition. And they'll be more likely to fall towards the path of least resistance because the juice is not worth the squeeze. So those two things tend to be the things that pop up the most.
Yeah, that's one thing that I was just thinking about as you were talking too is how critical it is, because I've been following you and that mindset approach is, and it just goes back to Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, is like the trans-sex mutation side of things where you can utilize that, the drive for sex in other capacities of life to really think and process more clearly. So I appreciate you explaining that. That's I think that's critical for men to understand kind of when the time is right, when you have an indifference towards sex, how that can impact just so many other areas of your life.
Completely.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned, TRT not being like the end all, right? It's like, it's fantastic, right? And it's an amazing therapy, but what are, if we get a little bit kind of like into the details, what are some of the other things that you would recommend like to aid in that or to add on, right? Like if you're talking about, hey, a guy's trying to optimize his hormones and his health in general, in every aspect of his life, what are some of the other things that go in tandem with the TRT?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. So,
and I know that's kind of open, so go where you want with it.
yeah. I'll kind of cover everything and then we can kind of drill down on specifics. So
Sweet.
This is where there's a lot of, I don't like using the word misinformation because that was COVID propaganda, but there's a lot of bullshit online about this area. And I actually wrote a book called Beyond TRT to dispel a whole bunch of these myths. So when you go on testosterone replacement therapy, it doesn't create a need to take every other hormone that the body produces. It doesn't create an acquired deficiency in what are called the upstream hormones. But the analogy where there's smoke, there's fire rings true. So if you're a man and you've got age-related hormone decline, or you've got secondary hormone suppression from diet and lifestyle issues, or whatever's led you to needing TRT, there is a good chance that testosterone is not the only hormone in the body that's dysregulated. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is they either think they have to take every hormone, which they don't, or they think that they just have to solve all their problems with testosterone, and that doesn't work either. So it's very important that guys are working with a practitioner who can assess for all hormones. So things like thyroid, pregnenolone, DHEA, growth hormone are very important to be looking at, as well as melatonin. So from a hormone standpoint and an overall health standpoint, it is integral that men are looking at all aspects of their health. Upgrading your testosterone levels is like upgrading the engine in your car. I mean, great, key component, but if the other areas of the car need a service, the testosterone actually might not be good for the vehicle. So if you upgrade a car that is in dire need of a service in all capacity, and you just come in and put a Lamborghini engine into it, you might rip out of the car park, but it's going to fall apart in 8 to 12 weeks, and this shows up as side effects. So it's important that guys are getting their overall health assessed. Liver disease is something that pops up all the time that I see. Fatty liver disease is a huge one, as well as insulin resistance, which is particularly prevalent in the United States, less of an issue over here in Eastern Europe, but insulin resistance is a big problem. Jay has championed the messaging on this, all credit to him. He's been harping on about it for about a decade, about insulin resistance being one of the #1 causes of side effects on TRT. And that's something that can often be remedied both with adjunct treatments, but primarily with diet and lifestyle. And the other things to be looking at, and I guess this kind of comes back to the car analogy as well, that there's a very simple paradigm which gets overlooked because it's not something you can sell in a pill, and maybe it requires a bit more critical thinking than some TRT clinics are capable of. But what guys need to understand is that if you want to have the healthy testosterone levels that you should have, so if you want to have the levels of a healthy man your age, you need to be a healthy man your age to be able to tolerate those levels. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And this is one of the biggest problems that I see every day in terms of guys trying to resolve these issues. They're going, my testosterone protocol is good. I'm doing like 2-3 injections a week, daily injections, twice daily transcranial cream. I've got my protocol dialed in, but they're, drinking 2 beers a night. They're 25% body fat. They're not training properly. They're eating a bullshit diet. They're not sleeping properly. They've got all these lifestyle deficits that would be leading to testosterone suppression. So the body is pumping the brakes, and they're coming in and they're going, I'm smarter than you. I'm going to pump the accelerator. And what happens? The car's not driving forward smoothly. It's stuttering. And this is showing up in side effects. So this is one of the biggest issues that we see, is a disconnect between the testosterone levels that guys are injecting and the testosterone levels that they realistically should have. And this is what causes the issues. So a lot of the time with men, it's as simple as putting the right testosterone number in, Bob's your uncle, everything's sweet, and they go about and live a very happy, healthy life. But for the other guys, when that doesn't work out well, generally there's a deficit going on in the overall holistic health paradigm that a lot of the time they don't want to look at because that's difficult, it's uncomfortable, it's potentially something they've known they've needed to fix for a long time, but have still been putting it off. And this can be the ugly wake-up call to go, hey, if you want to feel optimized, you actually have to do the fucking work. And this can sometimes be a very rude slap in the face for guys because they're not willing to accept that. And that causes issues.
Yeah, the takeaway is it's not a magic bullet, right? If you're a flaming human dumpster fire, right? Like if you're metabolically dysregulated and your body's not, in a state of like somewhat decent health, you can take testosterone, but it's not going to be the end all be all. So I 100% agree with that, man. There's so much there's so much that goes into the human body and maintaining health. For sure.
Let's dive a little bit into this, because you had mentioned one that I'm always curious about, and that's melatonin and your impact on sleep. Obviously, there's that catered towards like a balanced life. And then if you could dive on the backside of that a little bit more, what I've approached to as a supplementary device, obviously, more hypertrophy within my day-to-day, getting in resistance training, and then as well as the microvitamin intake. One thing I've really dialed in on is incorporating ashwagandha and creatine as supplementary to devices to aid. But is there anything specific that you would call out to really add on? Maybe it's 2 or 3 things that give a good cadence for that total body optimization.
Yeah, I like this topic because it's like, I look at these as, there tend to be 2 categories of interventions that guys need. There's categories of interventions that you need, which are specific for you. And these are, dealing with people's maybe not unique challenges. People tend to fall into buckets. But then there's also this category of like, what are supplements or what are things that everyone can do? And maybe the supplements are things that people don't necessarily need, but everyone could benefit from. And I think they're really good to talk about because the supplement industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's a gajillion million things that you can take, and they're very well marketed. So it's a great question. I really like melatonin, but I do also recognize that in practice, not everyone responds well to melatonin. Some guys will take 0.1 milligram and they will be like a zombie for the entire day. So if you don't tolerate melatonin, my friend Dr. Keith Nichols and I have a great video on YouTube. It's actually my most viewed video, which is interesting, of all subjects, is on melatonin. We shot it a couple of months ago. And I made the statement that you should take as much melatonin as you can tolerate. But for some people, that's 0, and that's important to recognize. But melatonin is one of the body's chief antioxidants. It's not that good of a sleep aid relative to other things, but it is extremely good for you. And for a lot of people, I would argue for everyone, melatonin production is to some degree compromised. And this can be improved, and this should primarily be improved by interventions in terms of, not looking at screens right before you go to bed, not having all the lights on in the house, getting morning sunlight, lining up your circadian rhythm, all that kind of stuff, super important. But I think when we're looking at, I don't like using the word biohack, but that's what it is. If we're going to look at biohacks, optimizing melatonin signaling may be one of the things that over a lifetime makes a huge difference in your overall health outcomes, because it's one of your body's chief antioxidants. I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, so my apologies to him, but John Lawrence, but he has a book called The Miracle Molecule, which is on melatonin, and he talks about very high dose melatonin in there. And the patient population, actually I'm going to be careful with my vocabulary, the client population that I work with who benefits the most from high dose melatonin are people with chronic injuries that prevent them from getting comfortable when they sleep. So if you've got bad hips, bad back, herniated discs, issues in your body that you physically find it hard to get comfortable and rest at night, melatonin in higher doses, so I'm talking like 10, 20 milligrams up, tends to really shine for those in those categories. The other molecules that I would be looking at that I think are universally beneficial on TRT, the other one is glutathione. Your melatonin and glutathione are your body's 2 primary endogenous antioxidants, meaning they are the 2 naturally occurring antioxidants in the human body. And when we look at the stresses and the toxic issues in the modern environment that we're dealing with, I think preventatively safeguarding against those things is probably the most beneficial thing from a supplemental standpoint, because vitamins and nutrients, you can, if you try, get them from diet. Can't get glutathione from diet. And a lot of people genetically don't make glutathione as well as they think they do. The caveat for glutathione is that it needs to be in a reduced form or a liposomal form, otherwise it's not bioavailable. There's a myth that you have to take NAC to increase glutathione levels in the body. This is not only just completely untrue, but the problem with using NAC long-term is it will disrupt the biofilms in the gut, and most particularly, it will disrupt the gut mucosal lining. It's actually used as a biofilm disruptor in the gut. So not good for long-term gut health, is effective for increasing glutathione, but honestly, it's a poor man's glutathione, and people should just spend the money and take real glutathione. So I like melatonin and glutathione. And then if I was to add an extra one to that, I think CBD oil is worth looking at for anyone who is stressed, anxious, stressed, difficulty sleeping, racing mind, chronic injuries, stuff like that. I think CBD and high dose omega-3 fish oil, with the caveat being it has to be excellent quality fish oil, not rancid, not full of mercury, triglyceride form. Looking at a therapeutic dose of omega-3 fish oil, like 2 to 4 grams of combined EPA, DHA per day with, I think CBD shines in lower doses, like 10 to 50 milligrams. I think in higher doses, it may have anti-androgenic effects. So lower doses of CBD, higher doses of omega-3, melatonin, and glutathione. If people want to optimize their health beyond TRT, I think those are worth looking at. And then beyond that, I would defer to Jay's work on low-dose desiccated thyroid and growth hormone supplementation. I think that approach as a whole, that's like the deluxe edition of TRT that guys can look at.
Yeah, it's cool you say that. I actually just went through a course of the 10-day peptide bioregulators, right? The thyrogen is the thyroid one, and I've struggled with like Hashimoto's in the past. Actually got it basically healed to where the markers were under wraps. You wouldn't even have known I had it, but it kind of spikes from time to time, right? If times of heavier stress and stuff like that. So that's something that I'll do every probably 3 or 4 months, is do one of those 10-day courses of the bioregulators, and that's the desiccated thyroid. Are there any things like more, because I feel like the fish oil, the CBD, the glutathione, these, I don't want to say these are commonplace, these are just more well known. Anything like more fringe, like peptides or stuff like that's kind of cool, that's like, more new technology that you can think of?
Maybe I'm old-fashioned. I'm super conservative.
Yeah, and that's cool too. Yeah.
And the reason why I'm super conservative with it is that I guess because I had a history of having a brain injury, it makes me veer on the side of caution. But when we're looking at someone who's healthy, who wants to get healthier, I think if something lacks long-term human studies, I think the question is like, is the risk to reward ratio in favor of reward if we're dealing with the unknown as a variable? And I think with a lot of these things, they all go well until they don't. And I have concerns that, particularly with a whole bunch of these newer peptides, and not all peptides, some peptides I think are phenomenal. BPC does lack human data, but it is an endogenously occurring human peptide. So like, I think that that's something that the risk to reward ratio is in favor of reward. I've used it extensively personally. But I think that when we're looking at, health optimization, I really like to focus on what can we do, not what can we take, because again, I'm just a little bit conservative with this stuff, because I do worry that guys are throwing all caution to the wind with the more fringe stuff when it's not something that's necessarily needed. And I would hate for guys to, take something new and trendy and novel because it sounds cool, and then find out that later it led to them getting cancer in their late 30s, early 40s, or it led to, some kind of incurable condition that we don't really know how to fix. And, I don't want to get too into stuff that will get us banned, but I think in the last few years, I think if guys haven't learned the consequence of taking pharmaceuticals that don't have long-term human data, I think if guys haven't learned that lesson, they may never learn it. But yeah, I'm a little bit, I prefer to double down on the things that are really valuable for human health. And the thing that I see that works really well in practice, and it sounds boring because it's not sexy, but it's being across everything. And in my experience, guys will tend to double down on their strengths in the hope of neglecting their weaknesses, in the hope of compensating for the weaknesses they're neglecting. So for example, guys might have, be more type A in personality type. They'll double down in stimulant stacks and productivity routines and ice baths and saunas and cardio, but completely neglect their sleep quality, which is leading them to need all of those things in the first place. I constantly see guys trying to fix their psychology with their biology. So they try to biohack their mental health when they've just got underlying psychological thought patterns and traumas that need to be resolved. And I also see things the other way around. Guys try to, manifest and psychologically overcome issues that are to do with physical poor health. Things like, you can go to a therapist all you want, but if you have Hashimoto's, you're going to be depressed. Like it's just, that's biology. So I really double down on the things that I know that are safe and good for people. And the stuff that I've seen that really works well in place of like the more novel fringy shit is massively increasing bioavailable micronutrition. And I prefer to do it with things that come from nature. So things like organ meats, things like high quality organic greens, things like high doses of omega fish oil, as well as, just natural superfoods like grass-fed red meat, egg yolks, things like this. And when guys really flood their body with really good quality micronutrition regularly for a long period of time, I think that's what leads to the outcomes that they're looking to achieve from the short-term biohacks. That's just what I've seen.
Yeah, that's great. And I think exercise too, just to piggyback on that, it's like you're tired, you're depressed, go freaking for a walk or a run or go move your body.
For movement.
Yeah.
And that
I made a joke the other day on my social media that, like, back when I was growing up in Australia, and I'm sure you had them as well, there were these like infomercials for these like bullshit like home gym equipment things. It would be like the Aptron 2000 and stuff like that, and it was like 20 or 30 minutes a day, and you'll end up like this. And all the people who used to laugh at that are probably obese and on fucking antidepressants now. And if they just got the Abtron 2000, that probably would have worked out better for them than the side effect-ridden drugs that they're taking at the moment. One of the most important things that guys can do for their mental health, if they're in a situation, is and again, shout out to Jay for this. Jay is like the cardio king. Get a cardio machine at home, like especially if you work from home, especially if you're doing a sedentary job. Get a cardio machine and a TRX and some bands. And that stuff in combination with TRT, like testosterone replacement therapy gives guys the foundation to like build themselves into the best version of themselves that they can possibly be. But the workload isn't any different. You just have the capacity to be able to do and respond to the workload appropriately. You still got to do a shitload of work to be able to get to that level. And Jay's a great example of that. So I think when we're looking at these, biohacks and things that guys can do, it's like, if you're going to be getting into peptides, if you're going to be getting into fringe stuff, only do that if you've already got all of those foundations nailed to the point that you've plateaued, and then look at that stuff if you want to. But I think guys rush to that stuff because it's easier to jab a peptide every day than do 45 minutes of cardio.
Yeah, I think that was almost kind of a personal question I wanted to know for myself than more so for the audience. Because, like, I'm dialed in on my exercise, my nutrition's dialed in as well. And, like, I'm on the TRT and the peptides and stuff. So I'm always kind of, I kind of maybe am the opposite of you. I like being a guinea pig sometimes. Yes, I know there's risk to it too, but I'm like, if I'm going to recommend something or make a reference about something, I like to try it first. If it doesn't seem to work or help, then I usually stop. But yeah.
I don't want to get too personal, but if you've got I'll send you a lecture that I've done on what I call subclinical Hashimoto's. So if you've got like Hashimoto's antibodies that are present but not flaring, especially on TRT, because a lot of the metabolism of testosterone is regulated by T3. So if you've got issues with, thyroid functionality, using things to reduce reverse T3 and then optimize thyroid levels. So, even just like a low dose of NDT, like 15 to 30 milligrams of NDT or up to 60 milligrams of NDT, in conjunction with something like phosphatidylserine or like what you mentioned before, ashwagandha, to bring cortisol down. Those two things in tandem, even if your thyroid looks okay on paper, I've never met, and I will stand by this statement because I work with this category of guys all the time who are trying to optimize. I've never met someone with detectable levels of Hashimoto's who didn't do better with at least a little bit of NDT.
Nice. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's good. And just to double down that a little bit more to explain it, because my understanding, obviously, when you look at testosterone, every guy wants to know his number. Like, just give me my number, right? We coach a bunch of guys and they want to know their number. But the real delicate number is what your free testosterone and the utilization of that free testosterone. Can you build into that a little bit?
Yeah, so free testosterone is definitely the most important number. One thing that we don't really understand too well is the role of bound testosterone. So I think some people completely dismiss total testosterone. I think it plays a role, but free testosterone is at least 80 to 90% of the role of androgens in the body when we're looking at symptoms of either optimized testosterone or hypogonadism. Absolutely. So the free testosterone level is going to be determined by the residual testosterone, which is floating around after your total testosterone has been bound by your two binding proteins, which are albumin and SHBG. Albumin tends to be relatively consistent across most patient populations outside of people with liver disease, but SHBG varies a shit ton. Even in healthy guys, you can have high SHBG, low SHBG, SHBG in the middle. And what free testosterone is going to determine is how many androgens are floating around at that point, which can activate the receptor and do testosterone stuff. So I use the analogy of a pinball table. You don't get points from the balls being on the table. They have to hit shit to get you points. So the more free testosterone you have floating around, the more balls you have on the table, but they also have to activate the androgen receptor. So it's a little bit more nuanced. And when we're looking at free testosterone, we've got, okay, this is a proxy for how much testosterone or how many balls on the table were flying around at this point. But what we're not able to measure is things like androgen receptor availability. We're not able to measure things like estrogen receptor availability. DHT levels are not very accurate to measure because it's a paracrine hormone. So it's a useful tool, but it only gives us half the picture. And the other half of the picture is the symptoms. The problem is that low testosterone symptoms are very ambiguous. And a lot of low testosterone symptoms are just a result of life circumstances, lifestyle, drugs, alcohol, junk food, not doing enough exercise. Not only will that stuff lower testosterone, but it will lead to you feeling like shit, which low testosterone will also do. So it's a tricky thing to look at, but if we're going to look at one marker that's going to give us a good indication of androgenic function, it's going to be free testosterone. And the problem is that the range for this has dropped off a fucking cliff in the last 5 years. But even over the last 20 years, it's been an exponential downwards curve where every year over here in Australia, the bottom end drops by another 10%. It's ridiculous. So in this day and age, if you have a free testosterone that's not in the upper half of the range, maybe the upper quartile of the range, depending on the range you're looking at, your symptoms, if they are negative and you don't feel well, may be related to low testosterone. And the lower the free testosterone, the more likely those symptoms are going to be coming from the testosterone part.
And yeah, that's great. If I'm correct, it's the reason that like bar is being lowered is because rather than us keeping the standard high and saying, hey, you need to get healthier, they're lowering it to match how unhealthy people are. Is that correct? I mean, it's like they're basically like lowering the standards of where we should be in these reference ranges.
Yeah, it's a good question as to why this is happening. There's definitely theories that it's an agenda-driven approach. I think that when we studied science at university, the reference range is determined by the mean and the standard deviation. So basically, it's a recalculation of averages. The problem is that, like, if you look at a woman's estrogen and progesterone levels, for example, it's adjusted for where she is in her cycle and if she's menopausal. For a man, it's not adjusted for age at all. So whether you are 18 or 80, the reference range is going to be the same. And not only is this ridiculous, but it's also extremely misleading because the average GP, and no disrespect to doctors, they're smart people. I mean, they got through fucking medical school. But if a doctor's a jack of all trades and he's across a lot of things, and he has a look and goes, well, your testosterone level is in the middle of the range, so it's not likely that your symptoms are coming from that. That's a fair guess based on the paradigm they're operating in. It's wrong, but it's a fair guess because they can't be experts in everything. But the problem is that guys are going to their doctor with the negative symptoms. They're looking into their testosterone levels, and then they're getting told, oh, well, it's not coming from that. And the treatment in our guideline book is to give you an SSRI antidepressant, which makes everything far worse. So what's likely going on is that when we look at the average population of guys who are getting their testosterone checked, it tends to be older guys as part of like a prostate workup. And also the average male population, particularly in the US, is overweight. So when the average guy is not healthy, and then the average guy who's getting his testosterone checked is elderly, it's going to lead to a lowered reference range. And then we've also just got the decline of testosterone levels. I graduated high school in 2009. And one thing that was very interesting for me when I went back to the 10-year reunion is that there was a photo of all of us in year 12. So we graduate in Western Australia when we're 17. So there was the graduating class of 2009. There was the graduating class of 2019. And then there was also the graduating class of 99 and 89. So these are all 17-year-olds a decade apart. And it was like looking from grown men to children. It was a stark contrast. Every 10 years, the men were just less androgenic, smaller, and meeker. And I think if we look around these days at the average 18, 19, 20-year-old, I mean, you'd have to be in just delusional denial to say, oh yeah, testosterone levels are thriving these days. I mean, it's very obvious they're not.
Yeah, we were talking to Jay too, and this is probably one of the reasons that they do a standard deviation on the kind of the greater population. But what we're seeing is obviously a decline. I don't believe that even Australia is an emerging market. I think they're staying in overall general population. It's declining. Very much the same in the United States, where we aren't reproducing at a faster rate. So my question was to him: is it because people are having sex less often? And he's like, that's exactly right. So he's like, men are indifferent towards sex, what you referred to earlier in this. And then the first person that they go to is what, and this is for audience sake, is a GP, general practitioner, who never has a focus point, that probably doesn't actually know how to read biometric blood work. And they don't have a general understanding of what levels to look at. And so you're not going to a specialized individual that can understand where your hormone balances are. So that's where you come into play. And that's just some amazing information. I do have a question for you, because you brought this up, and I'd love to get the dynamic in terms of European culture versus United States culture. And you mentioned something specifically about insulin resistance, right? And then my question to that is, like, why is that? Why is there such a, we're groupings of people that do a lot of like similar things, right? But at the same time, America is so different than any other country. Obesity, and we have a major problem with that. What is the difference in Europe, and why is it that America is struggling so much more than Europe?
Yeah, so I've been living in Lithuania for the last 5 years. And for those who don't know where Lithuania is, it's very understandable. I didn't know where it was. It's north of Poland, so it's technically it's not Eastern Europe, because we're further north than that. Technically, it's the Baltic states, but culturally, people, if they're watching it from Lithuania, I'm sorry, but culturally, the Baltics are Eastern Europe. So I can't speak for the culture for the rest of Europe, and I think, Western Europe is probably becoming more like, America, Australia, and the UK. But when we look at Eastern European culture, there's two fundamental differences. One is people walk more, and it's because the towns are set up or the cities, typically they're divided into old town and new town areas. The cities are just a lot more walkable. It's just easier to get around walking because of how things are situated. And culturally, it's just built into the lifestyle more. So, I've seen people's like health apps on their iPhone, just people who aren't fitness conscious, and they're getting an average of 10 to 15,000 steps a day, just because it's just part of the day. So that's a factor, is people move more, but the food is also significantly different. So over here, the supermarkets are laid out very differently. You can still buy crap here. I mean, they have fucking Prime here now, and all that other shit's made it here, finally. But so there is still some Americanized crap on the shelf. But culturally, people don't really like it. Maybe the younger generation's getting into it a little bit from YouTube influence. But typically, the supermarkets have more perimeter food and less aisles. So we still have some processed crap. But the ingredients in the processed crap are far better, because the European Union regulates it a whole bunch more. So a whole bunch of the stuff that you guys have in your supermarket is banned here. Also, you can't just go and buy glyphosate. Like, you can't do that. It's very, very like limited by the government. Like, you can't just go out and buy a bottle of glyphosate from the supermarket. So we have much less pesticides. We have much more of an emphasis on ecological food, which is kind of like regenerative agriculture and organic food. But people tend to just eat more food that is made themselves, because the processed food just isn't really as much of an option. And people just culturally buy ingredients. We don't buy pre-packaged food. And when we eat out, the meals tend to be more kind of home-style food. And because a lot of these countries freeze in the winter, we get down to like, sub-zero temperatures for months at a time. Basically, it's just meat and potatoes. It's bodybuilder food. So, people eat a lot of meat and potatoes. Over here, like kefir is really popular. So, you still meet people who, people who are my age, like in their, whether they're late 20s, early 30s, early 40s, who, when they were, children, they grew up with their grandparents feeding them raw eggs and pig's blood and, like blood pudding and all that kind of stuff. So culturally, the food is just more old-fashioned, but it's significantly less hyper-processed. And the percentage of the diet that we eat of processed food versus what America eats is minuscule. And I think that, combined with the increased walking, is a big factor. The downside of Europe, though, is because of socioeconomic factors as well as the weather. Alcoholism is an issue here for sure, just like it is everywhere. But people are doing a whole lot better. I mean, people have still got their problems here, absolutely, but on average, people are significantly less obese.
Yeah, it's a lot less toxic lifestyle, right? Quality of products and ingredients. I look at the kids' food and I'm like, this isn't even freaking food. I got 2 young kids. He's got 3. It's like, I'm not putting that in my kid's body. And that's what's making up their little brains. It's the toxicities, the chemicals, all that. People here are less active. And yeah, it's like the standards like you were talking about. There's a similar example is like when people eat pasta here in the United States, or pasta that was created, right? Or even just wheat, then they have a sensitivity to gluten. Sometimes that's not even the problem, because then they go to Italy and they go on a pasta bender and they're eating pasta all day long and they don't have any problems. And it's because it's more of the chemicals that are attached to those gliadin proteins than the gluten itself. I think that's, I think there's validity to that for sure. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And the other thing here as well, like it's illegal to serve processed food to children in schools. Like, you can't do that. Like, it's just not allowed.
Oh my gosh, that's all they serve the kids here.
I've seen like YouTube videos where they're comparing, like they're showing like cafeteria lunches at schools, and like Australia is not much better. Like Australia has gone down the hole as well. But yeah, over here it's very, very, very different. And over here as well, there's also more access for people to be able to get affordable food when they're out that's not crap. Like in Australia, if you're like, let's say like a tradesperson, you're working in construction, like you're blue collar or something, and you're out on a job and you need to get some lunch, basically it's like gas station food, McDonald's, like there's not really options to get anything healthy. Whereas over here, like all the restaurants do like a local lunch, which will typically be like a soup, and then like the chef's specialty dish of the day, and then maybe even like a homemade dessert or something for like under 10 euros. And culturally, everyone goes out to these restaurants for lunch, and that's how the restaurants stay in business, because they get the cheaper lunch trade, but then people can go and get food for lunch that's actually healthy. So people don't have to eat this processed crap out of necessity and convenience, because if you're out for lunch, it's actually affordable to eat just normal, healthy, local, real food. So yeah, the food issue in the United States is terrible. Like I'm coming over for 6 weeks to speak at a couple of events and do some podcasts, and I've already organized all my meal prep companies for when I'm there. Like I'm not eating the crap that's over there.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that too is like the rat race lifestyle of the United States, right? Like people are like rushing real quick to get a quick meal. They're eating standing up at their desk, right? They're not letting their body like get into parasympathetic state where they can actually rest and digest and absorb that food. They're still fight or flight, spiked cortisol while they're shoveling food in their gut. It doesn't make for a great metabolism. So I think, yeah, culturally that's huge too. One thing I wanted to kind of, let's maybe pivot a little bit, but real quickly, just like the mental health side of things too. I know that's something you talk about as well when it comes to, guys optimizing their health and hormones and stuff. How much of a factor is that? I mean, I know the answer is going to be that it's a big one, but how much do you, when you're doing your coaching and you're educating and stuff, how much are you kind of tying that in?
I tie it in as much as possible. I don't want to get too woo-woo, but if you had Jay on, he would have got a bit woo-woo. So
you can get woo-woo. We're all about the woo-woo, man.
Jay got real woo-woo on us.
Me and Jay are going to have some fun on another one.
Okay, so in the period before I did this, I was teaching mindfulness meditation. That was my job. And we used to do science-based mindfulness meditation workshops for parents and teachers on how to teach it to kids. So it was all based on neuroscience. It wasn't based on spirituality. And that was a big underlying factor for my approach with mental health, because I think that guys look at their mental health as something they can't change or they can't fix without drugs. And that's like looking at your body composition and being like, oh, I can't change that without drugs, or I'm just born fat. It's like everyone knows, it's like, no, you can change how you eat, you can go to the gym and you can fix that. Mental health is the same. You can work on your mental health. Now, some of us have dispositions towards certain things. Some of us have been dealt particularly rough hands in life, and that's left a scar. And that's okay, because that's just part of going through life as a man. But I think that what everyone is trying to do in this space, whether they recognize it or not, is they're trying to subjectively improve their experience of being alive. So we want to live a better quality of life, and we want to feel better and have a better time while we're here. I think that's what everyone's trying to do. And the complexity of the human organism is that we're basically an interconnected machine, so kind of like a car, but we're also sentient and alive, and we have free will. And this is very complex because we're basically experiencing ourselves being alive. All these biological inputs are impacting the conscious manifestation of our thoughts. But then we're also interacting with the world, and the world's complex, and there's a whole bunch of other people doing the same thing, and we're forming relationships, and we're trying to be successful, and we're trying to get fulfillment, and there's all these different factors going on. And we didn't get an instruction manual. Most people don't know what the fuck they're doing. And the societal conditioning is about as toxic as it can possibly be. So it's tricky. I think that we're living in a world that is the best time to be alive. I mean, in terms of just prosperity, but we're also being dealt new and unique challenges that we haven't evolved to face. You know, now there's wolves in sheep's clothing. So it's tricky. Life is tricky. And I think that a lot of guys, particularly younger guys, are dealing with realizing that life is harder than they thought it was going to be when they were a teenager, and it slapped them in the face and they don't know what to do. One of the best times in my life was the school holidays between year 11 and year 12, like the final school holidays, when I was like playing video games and eating junk food and just chilling. I had no responsibilities, and I had basically an adult mind, and everything was awesome. Then you become 30, or you get older and you become 40, and so forth. And now you're expected to have mastery over life, mastery over self, mastery over your health. And the world is a constant changing dynamic, and people are just like, this isn't fun and cruisy. This is really fucking hard. And dealing with learning that in real time, I think, is difficult. And I think a lot of guys are basically dealing with that. And it's like, well, okay, how do I navigate this? What do I do? And I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I do have tips that have worked for me and worked for a lot of guys who have worked with me and who followed this advice. And I like the philosophy of yin and yang. So I think the two things that work very well for men's mental health is learning some form of mindfulness meditation, which is basically learning to be able to regulate your emotions and create a distance between the input and the output. So creating space between what happens and what you do, and think before you act. Very important. And learning to regulate your emotions is extremely important because it gives you free will. It lets you choose what you want to do rather than be a leaf blowing in the wind. And I think that's very important. And it's also very important to be able to keep your cool in stressful situations and choose how you're going to respond. It's also very important to not get overwhelmed by things when things get difficult and make shit decisions. But the aspect of mindfulness and meditation, which is limited, is that it's easy to do that when you're sitting in a quiet room with a candle on, listening to some calming music. But life is dynamic and difficult. So learning martial arts is also something that's very valuable. And I had no interest in learning martial arts until my testosterone level was higher. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. So I think starting TRT is a perfect time for guys to learn martial arts. Learn whichever one you can find the best coach in. But I will flag that I have seen more debilitating injuries from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than I have seen from any other sport. So I recommend learning striking. And the advantage of learning striking is that you are getting yourself into and I don't mean that you actually need to go and fight someone. I treat brain injuries. I don't think people should actually go and fight, but doing like pad work, like one-on-one training with a martial arts coach is the most powerful and efficient form of experiential therapy that exists for men in the world. Because what you're doing is you're getting into a combat simulating environment, and you're learning to keep your cool, and you're learning to think and actually be able to execute what you want to execute and not get overwhelmed. If you're struggling because you open your inbox on a Monday morning and you got a bunch of emails, or you're struggling to put your laundry away and do the dishes and cook a meal prep on a Saturday, like if that's what you're struggling in with life, you have a skill issue. And the best way to improve the skill issue is to get comfortable doing harder things so that things seem easier. Because life is going to get harder as you get older, because the burden of responsibility for men goes up as you get older. You can kind of get away with being a bit of a loser when you're 20, but like less so when you're 30, definitely not when you're 40, definitely not when you're 50. So if you're struggling with life, also accept that it's going to get harder. So you have to get harder or you're fucked. So I think learning martial arts is very valuable, even if it's just like a once a week thing, just to have it as part of your weekly routine. Because if you go and do that and get pushed to your physical limit every week, everything else will be way easier. And if you have a strategy of being like, I'm going to eat well, I'm going to get up early, I'm going to train, I'm going to do this, in the moment when it's difficult to do that, it's not as difficult as getting punched in the face. So that contrast is super valuable, because otherwise people go the other way and they develop neurosis, which is basically snowflake syndrome. And this is one of the biggest challenges people have, is that they're too soft and everything's too difficult and they just fuck out and quit. So I think if guys can learn to master some form of violence, or at least just practice it regularly in a safe and controlled way, but then also learn to calm their thoughts and regulate their emotions and exert free will and be at peace with their mind. I think if you can do those two things and you can just look after your physical health and not eat shit and not drink alcohol and exercise and get some sunlight and do all the stuff that your grandma told you to do, I think if you do all that stuff, you'll probably be okay.
Yeah, that's good. The grounding mechanism is always something that we always want to live, especially as men. If you're like, if you're a loser in your 50s, I'm not going to lie, chances are you're still probably going to continue to be a loser. Like, the reality of changing is like gets more and more difficult, obviously, age, because you say the responsibility is obviously greater. But that element of, and I had to work through this, of like, it was always the next thing in terms of like the racing thoughts. But it's through obviously like breath work that has helped me, like just throughout the day. I put a reminder in my phone as one practical way that is like, it dings and is like, hey, just breathe, like stop and be present for a minute just to get 10 deep gut breaths. And so that's like the trigger point for me to be like, just sit down, breathe, become present, ground yourself so that your thoughts aren't racing to the next thing. Because, everyone says this now, the journey is the destination. But I always go back to, do you have kids?
No, I have a 5-month-old puppy though.
A month-old puppy. Hey, that's responsibility right there.
Yeah.
So my mind always goes, I got an 8, 6, and 4-year-old. But do I want to, do I want to race forward 12 years and have those kids at, 8, 20, 16, and 18, or 20, 18, and 16? No, I don't want that. All right. So what's the opportunity right now to ground, be present, and then evaluate? So that's a good thought. But I like the idea of incorporating some sort of like sport activity. I'm a basketball player. I love playing basketball. And so I train specifically, I'm 39, but like I put cardios in the morning, and then obviously like a big piece of a non-negotiable for day to day to me is bone density and muscular structure as far as overall body composition. So I want to make sure I maintain that, but I maintain a body where I can keep playing ball. I love playing ball. So that's where I get my outlet, but those things kind of like ebb and flow. I do have a question for you though, and I don't know if you want to go this route, but that bone density and just muscle for the purposes of longevity and how TRT aids in that. So if you want to speak on that just a little bit, because that's one thing that is a major focus point to me, and I would love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, so I didn't come from a health and fitness background in this space. Most people in this space came from like a bodybuilding background or some kind of fitness background and transitioned into this. I transitioned into this from psychiatry. So my primary interest in testosterone was, how does it affect the brain? What are the mechanisms of testosterone that, like, how would we compare testosterone, for example, to like, drugs for depression or drugs for ADHD or drugs for anxiety? And that was my primary area of interest. I was always into fitness because I was a musician. I was on stage. Like, there was a degree of physicality that came with that, and also aesthetics. But, I've been going to the gym recreationally since I was like 17, 18, but was never really into fitness. One of the things that I learned that was absolutely integral from working with so many guys over the last few years is the importance of body composition. So not just bone mineral density and muscle mass, but also reducing excess body fat. You can't be healthy if you're not lean. So abs aren't just for the beach. Abs just aren't for how you look in the mirror. Abs are for insulin sensitivity. And keeping a lean body fat and having a good amount of muscle is your primary insurance policy against becoming insulin resistant. And when we look at the diseases of aging, being dementia, diabetes, cancer, and heart disease, the primary four, they all have a component of insulin resistance to them. So having as much muscle mass as possible within physiological parameters, becoming a mass monster to the point that you need a CPAP is not healthy, but you have to really try to do that. You're not going to accidentally go on TRT and become absolutely fucking huge. Trust me, like it's not going to happen. But having a healthy amount of muscle and having your body fat like under 15%, ideally under 12%, if we really want to, focus on specifics, which is the goal I'm currently working towards, is absolutely integral for your health, because as you get older, you become more frail and brittle. And bone mineral density is absolutely crucial, because as we get older, so many guys are having issues with hips and spines, knees, elbows. And when something blows out on the body like that, the chronic inflammation that can come with it can start a cascade of other inflammatory diseases. So prehab is cheaper and easier in all aspects than rehab. Take it from someone who had a brain injury. It is absolutely start investing in prehab now. And I think so many guys want to look like athletes, but they don't want to do all the shit that comes with being an athlete. They want to go and lift weights 6 times a week, but they don't want to do any of the mobility work. They don't want to do any of the, strengthening through full range of motion work. They don't want to do any of the cardio. They just want to have the biceps and the abs and the pecs. But if guys want to be athletic, you have to practice athleticism, which comes with a whole bunch of other movement-based, training principles that you'd probably be into doing basketball. Stuff like Ben Patrick, the knees over toes guy. I mean, all the stuff that he's talking about at the moment. I'm so glad that that's becoming trendy, because that's the stuff that so many guys need, either in place of what they're doing or for most guys to supplement what they're doing. And having all of this stuff and doing it now before it becomes an issue is crucial. And the problem is guys will disregard that. They'll fuck around and find out. They'll get the injury and be like, oh, I wish I'd taken care of myself before this happened. Hindsight's 2020. But for the guys who were smart and who managed to avoid injury up until this point, like, start working on the prehab now, because you're not bulletproof and you're going to get less bulletproof as you get older.
That's so good. Man, I know we want to respect your time and obviously kind of don't want to go too long here, but I want to just final question. If you can, man, like you're a guy in your mid 30s to 40s, you don't know if testosterone's right for you, and you're kind of trying to figure out like, hey, how do I optimize my health? Maybe you're not a gym guy like us. Maybe you're not, focused on diet and stuff like that. What would you say, like top three or 5 things that you're like, hey, these are the things that you got to focus on today?
Drugs, alcohol, junk food, not doing enough exercise. They're the big ones. So I kind of look at, when I'm working with my clinics, there tend to be 2 categories of guys. There's the guys who are into health and fitness, and sometimes they can be a little bit too neurotic about things. But there's also like what I just call Gen Pop, like the average guy who's learning about TRT, because back in my day, TRT was niche. Now TRT is going mainstream, which is great because more guys are realizing that this is the intervention that they need. It's not a bad thing. But when TRT goes more mainstream, it leads to more mainstream guys seeking TRT. And more mainstream guys tend to have a very poor understanding of just how much work and effort it takes to be healthy. One of the biggest things I see is guys are doing maintenance work and expecting transformational results. So the easiest things to look at, the biggest movers, like the highest ROI things to look at, is cutting out the junk food, particularly the deep fried shit. Learn to cook or get a meal prep company. One of my favorite ones in the States, Nutrition Solutions, like, find a company like that, work with them. You guys familiar with them?
Yeah, we had Chris on our show, man. I eat 2 of those meals every single day, bro. They're the best.
I have no affiliation with them, but like fantastic model. Like, so either learn to cook or outsource it, but do it strategically. That's the biggest factor, is nutrition, not just putting healthy, good stuff in, but stop putting the shit poison into your body. That's easy to do, especially when the healthy food tastes good. And if you suck at cooking, then it might be good to outsource that. But learn to cook something like beef and potatoes, like mince and potatoes. It's not hard. Like get good at cooking, or get
Just
someone to
real, just real quick on that, and I want you to continually build on, but I just want to do a little promo inside of this. If you are a Florida-based or Georgia-based resident, you can get 10% off
15.
right now, 15% off, I'm sorry, at Spread Oaks Farms, and you can get your all your red meat delivered to your house on ice at any point if you're in the Georgia and Florida areas. So continue on. I appreciate it.
That stuff's key. Like over here, like, you know, we just buy like a quarter of a cow or half a cow at a time. But getting good meat in the fridge, particularly mince, like if you can't cook, like don't bother with steaks, just get mince, like ground beef, like just cook that. Steaks are difficult to cook, and if you fuck up a good steak, you'll regret it. So just get ground beef and get good at cooking that. So that's number one. The other thing is alcohol. You can't drink alcohol and be healthy. Sorry, like you just can't. So pick one. But if you want to be healthy, alcohol is just not worth it. It tastes bad. The buzz isn't that good. It makes you feel shit the next day, and it's literally poison for every organ in the body. If it's someone's birthday or it's someone's wedding and you want to cheers with a whiskey 1 or 2 or 3 times a year and have one standard drink, cool, do that. But regular alcohol consumption, anything more than 1 or 2 drinks on a special occasion, and it's just easier to have none, to be honest, because it just makes you feel shit. Cut alcohol out completely. That's a huge factor as well. And drugs. You know, drugs are a big problem, not just illicit drugs, but things like hair loss medications, SSRIs, antipsychotics, all of these medications that people are on that maybe they don't need to be on. People need to look at the systemic side effects that come from that. Obviously, talk to your doctor. This is not medical advice, but if things aren't going well for you and you're on a pharmaceutical drug, maybe look to see if there's a link between those two things, because that could be a factor. And not doing enough exercise, especially post-COVID. If you work at home, you have to make a really good conscious effort to exercise, and going to the gym 4 or 5 days a week is not enough. You have to do that, plus go out for walks to get your steps in, or get a cardio machine, or do dedicated cardio and do stretching and mobility, because we've removed that, you know, 5, 6, 7,000 steps you just got from going to the office or going to your job or going and doing these things. So if you're working at home, you might not be doing anywhere near the amount of overall movement that you need to do. So move more, and ideally move outside as much as possible. If you can combine movement with sunlight, nature, you know, that's, you're listening to an audiobook at the same time. That's a very efficient use of your time for self-development. So those are the lowest hanging fruits, and doing all of them. And I think if guys cut the poison, put the good food in, and then practice the healthy lifestyle, that's integral whether you're on or off TRT. And if you're not doing those things, this is one of the biggest challenges I see in terms of expectation management, is you can't realistically expect to feel good if you're not doing those things. Like you can't, like it's just unrealistic. So those are the things that guys need to be focusing on as massive #1 priorities. Everything after that, I mean, sleep is a big factor as well, particularly sleep apnea. Like a lot of guys have undiagnosed sleep apnea. If you have a wife, that's a free sleep study. She'll tell you if you have sleep apnea. Free sleep study. Otherwise, don't go get a sleep study off the bat. Download an app called Snore Lab. Put it on your phone next to your bed and have it listen to you if you snore. That's a cheaper, quicker way than getting a sleep study. And if that's going on, have it properly investigated with an ENT. Don't just go straight on a CPAP. Work out if there's something obstructing the airway other than mass. Because if you're not sleeping properly and you're not recovering properly, that chronic stress over time will mess you up too. So those are the big things to be looking at for sure.
Yeah, and that's always awesome. What we talk about. It's like
there's no silver bullets, bro. There's no like quick fix, right? And it's
all of the work, things, bro. All of the things. The body's meant to move. And, you know, that's usually what we end on the podcast is what does it mean to live full field? And that's exactly living full field, is when you can encapsulate all those things, make sure you're moving the body, and then just making quality decisions on a daily basis.
That's right. Man, Dave, thank you so much for your time, man. Can you leave our audience with kind of where they can find you, Instagram, online, your website, all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram at I'm Dave Lee. And you can also find me at www.advancedfundamentalhealth.com. I've got a couple of very affordable ebooks on there that are like TRT guides. And I also do private consultations if anyone wants to work with me. I do have a bit of a wait list. So one thing I also recently launched, and I'll give a plug, is on the school platform. So I had a private Facebook group for a long time, but Facebook's just a nightmare for communities. So I've launched a service called the TRT Academy, and it's $19 a month. And it features myself, my friend Ali Gilbert, as well as a colleague of mine from Marek Health, Tom Fellows Baker. And we're in there basically running the biggest, most informative, interactive, educational TRT platform in the world. Multiple Q&As every week, heaps of exclusive resources. We're going to be having private interviews in there. But most importantly, it's a place that people can come together as a community, ask questions, get expert advice. And we've made it as affordable as possible so that everyone can get the help that they need getting their TRT dialed in. So people can check that out on my website, the TRT Academy.
That's awesome. Hey guys, if you like this episode, as always, we just ask that if you found value, you'll leave us a review, you'll share this with your friends. This episode in particular brought to you by Nutrition Solutions. If you go to nutritionsolutions.com, use the code FULLFUELED15, you'll get 15% off your first order and enjoy some really awesome high protein, high quality meals to get on track like Dave just said. You want to take us away, baby?
As always, live full fueled, live beyond limits.
Welcome to the Full Fueled Podcast. I'm going to set what the new normal looks like in my life.
You're not limited by your genetics.
You have a superpower that is lifting people up.
So unfortunately, most businesses aren't going to use the highest quality ingredients.
What's your approach?
He's jacked.
I know he's jacked. That's why I'm asking him what he trains.
I don't think he lifts.
It's consistency in everything that we do that really compounds. The only way we're going to get the word out is with you. Live full fueled, live beyond limits, baby.